In 1954, most American families still had a relative who worked the land, and every one of those farms was anchored by a barn packed with tools we've completely forgotten. Number 17 saved farmers from a chore so brutal it broke backs for generations, and it vanished almost overnight. Number 4 stood in every single dairy barn in America, yet most people under 50 have never even seen one work. And number 1, it was the beating heart of the whole operation, so essential that a farm without it couldn't survive the winter. These 30 things were once as common as sunrise over a hayfield. Then, tractors replaced horses, milk went to bulk tanks, and the old ways disappeared into scrap piles. Let's count down the 30 forgotten things every 1950s barn had. Number 30, the nail keg. Before plastic buckets, every barn had a squat wooden nail keg in a corner, and it never truly emptied. Farmers bought nails by the keg from the hardware store, and long after the last nail was driven, the keg lived on. Turned upside down, it became a milking seat. Filled with sand, it held tools upright. Cut in half, it made a scoop for oats. The oak staves and iron hoops were built to outlast the man who bought them. Children sat on them to shell peas. Grandfathers rested on them at the end of a row. When the nails ran out, the keg's real life began, and nothing in a modern barn ever replaced it. Number 29, the foot pedal grindstone. In the corner of nearly every barn stood a great round sandstone wheel in a wooden frame with a pedal below and a tin cup of water dripping onto the stone. A dull sickle, a nicked axe, a blunt plow point, all of it came to the grindstone. The farmer pumped the treadle with one foot, held the blade at just the right angle, and sent up a fan of sparks and gray slurry. It took patience and a good ear. You could hear when the edge came true. A quality grindstone cost around $4 and served 3 generations. Children were paid a nickel to keep it turning. When bench grinders arrived, the old wheel went silent and weathered in the weeds. Number 28, the wire egg basket. Every farm wife carried one, an oval basket of galvanized wire, light enough for a child, roomy enough for 4 dozen eggs. Gathering eggs was a twice-daily ritual, and the open wire let air move so the eggs cooled evenly and didn't sweat and spoil. In 1953, farm eggs brought around 50 cents a dozen, and for many families that EGG money was the only cash a woman controlled outright. It bought thread, shoes, and Christmas. The basket went from the henhouse to the kitchen to the crate that rode to town on Saturday. Cardboard cartons and grocery store eggs ended the ritual, and the baskets now sell as decor to people who never gathered a warm egg in their life. Number 27, the kerosene barn lantern. Before electricity reached the last farms, and in many places well into the 1950s, chores began and ended by lantern light. The tubular barn lantern burned kerosene at about 15 cents a gallon and threw a warm circle of light steady enough to survive a draft or a kick. A farmer hung it above the cows at 4 in the morning, its glass globe fogging in the cold, its flame the only gold in a black-blue winter dawn. The smell of kerosene and warm cattle was the smell of morning itself. Every barn kept a spare wick and a can of oil. When the light bulb finally hung from the rafters, the lanterns were hung up too, and a certain quiet warmth went out of the barn. Number 26, printed feed sacks. Here's a detail that shaped a whole generation of American childhoods. Feed companies discovered farm wives were sewing clothes from the plain cotton sacks their chicken feed came in. So they started printing the sacks in florals, plaids, and calicos. By the 1950s, a farm woman chose her feed partly by the pattern, and it took 3 matching sacks to make a dress. A 50-pound sack of laying mash came home as a future shirt, apron, or set of curtains. Nothing was wasted, even the string was saved and rewound. When cheap paper and plastic bags took over, an entire folk craft vanished, and a whole way of dressing a family for free disappeared with it. Number 25, the salt block and holder. In the barnyard or nailed inside a stall sat a wooden or cast iron holder cradling a reddish-brown block of stock salt. Cattle and horses need salt, and before mineral tubs and fortified feed, the block was how they got it. You would see a cow work her rough tongue across it for long minutes, and over weeks the block wore into a smooth hollow shaped exactly like her stroke. A 50-pound block cost around 50 cents and lasted a season. Farmers learned to read their animals by the salt. Children licked it on a dare and regretted it. The block still exists on some farms, but the wooden holder, hand-built and worn glass smooth, has all but disappeared. Number 24, the hay knife. Before baling, hay was stored loose in the mow in a solid, settled mass, packed tight as a mattress. To feed it out in winter, you needed a hay knife, a wide, wicked-looking serrated blade with a two-handed grip, worked down into the pile like a saw through a haystack. A farmer climbed the mow on a January morning, breath steaming, and cut a block of hay free to pitch down to the cattle below. It was hard, rhythmic work, and a dull hay knife made it misery. The tool cost around $1 and hung by the mow door. When balers wrapped hay into neat, liftable bundles, the hay knife had nothing left to cut, and it slipped into the pile of forgotten iron. Number 23, the hand-crank corn sheller. Bolted to a bench or a post stood the cast-iron corn sheller, a hand-cranked machine that stripped kernels off the cob in seconds. You would drop a dried ear into the hopper, turn the heavy flywheel, and out one side poured a stream of golden kernels, while the bare cob shot out the other. Before this, families shelled corn by hand, thumbs raw and bleeding by the end of a bushel. The sheller turned an evening's misery into a few minutes of cranking, and children fought over whose turn it was to feed the cobs. The shelled corn fed the chickens and hogs. The cobs fed the stove. When picker shellers took over the whole job, the little iron machine rusted where it stood. Number 22, the fanning mill. Tucked in the granary was a tall wooden cabinet with a hand crank, shaking screens, and a wooden fan inside. The fanning mill used to clean seed grain before planting. A farmer poured in wheat or oats, cranked steadily, and the machine did 3 jobs at once. The fan blew away chaff, the screens sifted out weed seed and cracked kernels, and clean, plump seed dropped into a sack below. Good seed meant a good stand, and the mill was how a farmer controlled his own crop before certified seed existed. When seed came bagged and pre-cleaned from the co-op, the mills went still, and few people today could even name one. Number 21, the wooden wheelbarrow. Long before the stamped steel wheelbarrow, farms ran on wooden ones. A plank box, 2 handles worn smooth as bone, and a single wooden wheel with an iron rim a blacksmith had shrunk on hot. It hauled feed, manure, firewood, seed corn, and more than one sleeping child given a ride at dusk. A farmer often built his own over a winter, and the handles fit his own hands and no one else's. It creaked, it wobbled, and it never quit. Store-bought steel barrows rolled easier and cost only a few dollars, so the wooden ones were retired to lean against the barn wall. Now they hold geraniums on suburban lawns, their working days long gone. Number 20, the grain scoop shovel, not a dirt shovel. The grain scoop was a wide, curved aluminum blade with high sides, built to move loose oats, corn, and wheat by the bushel without spilling a kernel. Every barn had one hanging by the bin, its edge polished bright from 10,000 scoops. Filling the feed cart, loading the wagon, cleaning out the granary corner, the scoop did it all. And a strong man could empty a wagon box in minutes with the right rhythm. A good one cost around $2 and lasted decades. That easy swing and toss was muscle memory to a whole generation of farm boys. Augers and conveyors do the lifting now, and the bright scoop hangs unused, if it hangs at all. Number 19, the built-in loft ladder. Nailed flat to the wall of nearly every barn was a ladder that went nowhere but up, straight into the haymow through a square hole in the loft floor. Its rungs were often just 2x4s, spiked to the studs, worn pale and slick in the center from a century of boots and bare feet. Children treated it as a highway to a secret kingdom of loose hay and barn swallows. Farmers climbed it a dozen times a day. It had no maker and no price. It was simply part of the barn, built by whoever raised the walls. As barns emptied and machinery replaced the loft's purpose, the ladders were left clinging to the walls, leading up into dusty, silent spaces where no one climbs anymore. Number 18, cow kickers. Any farmer who ever milked a nervous cow knew the danger of a well-aimed hind hoof, and the barn kept a defense. The anti-kick device, a curved metal clamp that hooked over the cow's back and pinched gently in front of the hip, locking the leg so she couldn't kick. There were rope hobbles too, figure-eighted around the hocks. A restless heifer, a cow with a sore udder, the first frozen mornings, all called for the kickers, hung ready on a nail by the stanchions. They cost $1 or $2 and saved farmers from cracked shins, spilled pails, and worse. Milking parlors and machines changed the whole relationship between farmer and cow, and the little clamp that kept a man safe at 4 a.m. quietly disappeared. Number 17, the litter carrier. Here is the one that saved backs across America. Cleaning a dairy barn meant moving tons of manure by hand every single day, and before the litter carrier that meant a shovel, a wheelbarrow, and a ruined spine by 50. The litter carrier changed everything. A big galvanized tub hung from a trolley that rolled along a steel track bolted to the ceiling, running the length of the barn and out a door to the manure pile. A farmer forked the gutters full, gave the tub a push, and it glided the whole load outside on rails, then dumped with a lever and rolled back. A rig cost around $40 installed, and dairymen swore it added years to their working lives. Barn cleaners replaced it, and the overhead track rusts unnoticed above the empty stalls. Number 16, the butter churn. Before creameries collected every farm's milk, butter was made at home, and the churn was as familiar as the kitchen stove, though many a farm kept the churning out in the cool of the springhouse. Whether it was the tall stoneware crock with a wooden dasher pounded up and down, or the glass jar with a hand-cranked paddle, the job was the same. Work the cream until it broke into golden butter and buttermilk. It took 20 minutes of steady rhythm, and children were handed the dasher to build their arms and their patience. Fresh butter, salted and pressed into a wooden mold with a carved design, was a point of pride. Refrigerated trucks and dairy cases ended home churning, and the crocks became umbrella stands. Number 15, the milk strainer. Fresh milk straight from the cow carried bits of straw, hair, and dust, so no pail went to the can without passing through the strainer, a deep funnel of tin holding a round cotton filter disc. The farmer poured the warm, foaming milk through, and the pad caught everything the milk should not carry. Those filter discs came in boxes of a few hundred for $1 or so, and a fresh one went in at every milking. It was the barn's small daily act of care, the difference between clean milk that graded well and milk the creamery would dock. Bulk tanks with inline filters made the hand strainer obsolete almost overnight, and the tin funnel that once stood in every milk house went to scrap. Number 14, the three-legged milk stool. Nothing says a 1950s dairy barn like the little wooden stool with 3 legs, built low and light so a farmer could carry it in one hand, pail in the other, and drop down beside a cow in a single motion. 3 legs, not 4, because a 3-legged stool never wobbles on an uneven, straw-strewn floor. Many were homemade, a slab of oak with 3 dowels driven in, and each farmer's stool fit his own body from years of use. Hand-milking a herd meant hours on that stool, forehead pressed to a warm flank, the rhythmic hiss of milk into a foaming pail. Milking machines emptied the stools first, and the herds grew too large to milk by hand. The little stool became a flower stand in a hallway. Number 13, steel milk cans. Before the bulk tank, milk left the farm in tall steel cans, 10 gallons each, so heavy when full, a man needed his whole back and both hands to swing one onto the wagon. Each was stamped with the farm's number, and every morning they stood sweating at the end of the lane on a wooden stand built to truck bed height, waiting for the hauler. The clank of cans, the cold ring of the lids, the race to cool the milk before it soured. This was the daily rhythm of the dairy. A can cost around $10 and was guarded like treasure. When bulk tanks and tank trucks arrived in the late 1950s, the cans vanished from the roadside almost as a group, and the stands rotted where they stood. Number 12, wooden stanchions. Down both sides of the dairy barn ran the stanchions, pairs of vertical wooden bars that closed gently around a cow's neck to hold her at feeding and milking, then swung open to let her out. A cow learned her own stanchion and walked to it on her own, and a good farmer knew every animal by the spot she stood in. The wood was worn satin smooth and dark, where 1,000 necks had rubbed. Freestall barns, where cows roam loose, made the old lock-in stanchion obsolete, and the long wooden rows, once the very skeleton of the dairy barn, were torn out and burned or left to gather swallows' nests. Number 11, hay hooks. Handling loose hay, and later bales, called for hay hooks, a curved steel point set in a wooden crossbar handle, gripped in the fist so the point bit into the bale and did the pulling your fingers could not. Farmers wore them on their belts and could swing a bale onto a stack with a flick of the wrist that took years to learn. In the loose hay years, longer hooks helped drag great forkfuls into place. They cost under $1 and were as personal as a pocket knife. A man knew the heft of his own hooks. Big, round balers and mechanical handlers ended the need to touch hay at all, and the hooks that once hung from every farmer's belt slid into a coffee can of forgotten tools. Number 10, the pitchfork. Not the garden fork, the true hay fork, with 3 long, thin, springy tines on a slender ash handle taller than a man, balanced so perfectly it seemed to lift the hay itself. Before machinery, everything in the barn moved on the end of a pitchfork. Hay into the mow, hay down to the cattle, straw into the stalls, waste out the door. A farmer could work all day with a good fork and pace himself by its rhythm. It cost around $1.50, and a broken handle was spliced, wrapped, and used again. The pitchfork became the very symbol of the American farmer, immortalized in a famous painting, yet the tool itself, worn to a gleam by working hands, has all but vanished from daily use. Number 9. The horse collar and harness. Hung on wooden pegs along the barn wall, oiled and heavy, was the horse harness, and at its heart, the collar, a padded oval of leather and straw that fit over the horse's shoulders and let it pull a plow or wagon without choking. Fitting a collar was an art. Too small and it galled, too large and it slipped. A good set of harness cost $30 to $50, and a farmer soaped and oiled it on winter evenings to keep the leather alive. The smell of leather, horse, and neat's foot oil filled that corner of the barn. When the tractor took over the fields, the harness stayed on its pegs, stiffening year by year until it was only a shape on the wall no one remembered how to use. Number 8. The singletree. Where the harness met the load, hung the singletree, also called a whiffletree. A stout wooden bar, iron-tipped at each end, that the horse's traces hooked to so its pull spread evenly to the plow or wagon behind. A double team needed a double tree to join two single trees together. It was simple, brilliant engineering. The bar pivoted so a horse leaning into a turn didn't wrench the load sideways. Farmers kept spares hanging in the barn, hand-hewn from hickory or ash. When horses left the fields, the single trees came down, and today most people who find one in an old barn have no idea what the strange notched bar with the rusty hooks was ever for. Number 7. The weather vane. High on the roof peak or the cupola turned the weather vane, a rooster, a running horse, a trotting cow, or an arrow, and it was no mere decoration. A farmer stepping out at dawn read the wind before anything else, because wind meant weather, and weather meant everything to a man with hay down or a storm threatening the stock. A shift to the northwest promised a cold, clearing snap. A swing to the south, rain coming. The copper and iron vanes were often handmade, and a fine one marked a prosperous farm. Radio forecasts and the television weatherman took over the job of reading the sky, and the vanes were left to spin unwatched, prized now by collectors who pay thousands for what once cost a day's wages. Number 6. Barn cats. No barn was complete without its cats, not pets exactly, but working animals as vital as any tool, earning their keep by the grim daily war they waged on the rats and mice that would otherwise devour the grain. A good mouser was worth more than her weight in stored corn, and farmers guarded a reputation for having the best line of barn cats in the township. They lived half wild in the haymow and came running at the clang of the milk pail for a squirt of warm milk aimed straight from the cow. Children spent whole summers taming them. Modern grain bins are sealed steel and poison does the rest, so the working barn cat has faded and something living and warm went out of the barn with them. Number 5. The hay trolley. Look up in the peak of any old barn and you will see it. A steel track running the whole length of the ridge with a wheeled trolley, the hay carrier, that once did the heavy lifting no man could. When a wagon of loose hay pulled in below, a huge fork or sling grabbed a quarter ton at a time. A horse walking away from the barn hauled the rope over pulleys, and the trolley lifted the load high into the peak, ran it back along the track, and dropped it deep in the mow with the trip of a rope. It was the barn's great labor-saving machine. Balers made loose hay handling obsolete, and the trolley froze in place, still hanging up there in the dark, a rusted monument no one looks at anymore. Number 4. The cream separator. Here's one that stood in every dairy barn in America and which almost no one under 50 has ever seen work. The cream separator was a tall machine with a bowl of stacked spinning discs and a hand crank you turned to exactly the right speed, a bell warning you when you were too slow. Whole milk poured in the top. Centrifugal force flung the heavy skim milk one way and the light cream the other, and out two spouts ran cream for churning and skim for the hogs, perfectly divided. Before the separator, cream was skimmed by hand-offsetting pans overnight, losing half of it. The machine cost $60 to $100, real money, but it paid for itself in butter fat. When creameries began taking whole milk, the separators went cold, and their beautiful, complex bowls became the strangest puzzle in the antique store. Number 3, the cupola. Crowning the roof of nearly every good barn sat the cupola, a small louvered tower that looked ornamental but was in fact the barn's lungs. Warm, moist air rising off dozens of animals and tons of curing hay had to escape, or it would rot the hay and sicken the stock. So the cupola drew the foul air up and out, while fresh air rose from below. It was passive, silent, and free, engineered by builders who understood a barn as a living, breathing thing. A well-made cupola topped by that weather vane was also the crowning glory of the structure, visible for miles across the fields. Powered fans and open pole barn designs made it unnecessary, and as the old barns fall, these graceful little towers, half science, half sculpture, are lost, one collapse at a time. Number 2, lightning rods. Running along the ridge of the roof stood a row of lightning rods, slender iron spikes, often set with a colored glass ball, wired down to the ground at each end. They were not decoration and not superstition. A barn was the tallest thing for a mile, packed with dry hay, and a single strike could burn a family's entire livelihood to ash in 20 minutes. The rods gave the lightning a safe path to earth, and traveling salesmen once made whole livings installing them for a few dollars a barn. Fire insurance often required them. For generations, they were sober protection against the terror of a summer storm. Modern grounded steel buildings reduced the need, and the beautiful glass-balled rods now sell as antiques, their life or death purpose forgotten by the people who hang them on a porch. Number 1, the haymow. And finally, the beating heart of every 1950s barn, the haymow, the great loft above the animals, filled floor to rafters each summer with loose hay that would feed the herd through every day of winter. This was why the barn was built so tall, why the trolley ran the peak, why the ladder climbed the wall. All of it served the mow. Filling it was the hardest, hottest work of the farm year. The whole family and the neighbors laboring through July in choking dust and 100-degree heat to beat the rain. But a full mow meant survival. An empty one meant selling stock or watching it starve. Children played in it, courting couples hid in it, barn cats raised kittens in it, and the sweet, dusty smell of it was the smell of the farm itself. When baling and field storage arrived, the great loose hay mow emptied for the last time. Today, those vast lofts stand silent and dim above the empty stalls, cathedrals of a way of life that fed America and then quietly disappeared. Every one of these 30 things was once as ordinary as dirt, and every one is now a mystery to most Americans under 50. The barns still stand along our back roads, leaning and gray, their haymows empty and their trolleys frozen in the peak, but the tools, the skills, and the rhythms that filled them are nearly gone. If your family kept a barn like this, tell me in the comments which of these 30 you remember and which one your grandfather would have known by heart. Because these weren't just old tools. They were how America fed itself, and they're worth remembering.